Welcome to TPG Live, and we're jumping in right now. I'm Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and what happens next is shaped by you. Whether you're leading a global product team or just breaking into the field, this is your space. From interns to CEOs, startups to Fortune 500s, every voice here matters. This isn't just a live stream, it's a conversation. Drop your questions, insights, or hot takes into the chat room, and I'll be pulling your best ones right into the discussion live. If something makes you think differently, changes how you work, or sparks debate, share the live stream. There's someone in your network who should be part of this. We've got a fast-moving, honest, and unfiltered discussion ahead. Stick around, speak up, and let's make this one worth coming back to. Today, the on-camera portion of our roundtable is joined by Smita Patil, a product and leadership coach with 17 plus years of experience driving digital transformation across startups and enterprises. Smita is the founder of Product Forge, where she helps teams build resilient product cultures through strategy, training, and coaching. She has led cross-functional teams through discovery, delivery, and scale, and brings deep expertise in agile, lean, and outcome-driven product management. Smita regularly collaborates with C-level leaders, product teams, and engineers to bring vision and execution, and is passionate about mentoring the next generation of product managers, designers, and coaches. We're also joined by Lorenzo Mazzo, a fintech product leader with over 8 years of experience. Lorenzo has worked across SaaS, B2B, and B2C, holding product roles at Nubank, Experian, Cash Rewards, and now KiddyPay. He played a key role in helping scale Nubank's lending portfolio by over $2 billion and brings global perspective from working across LATAM, Europe, and Australia. A passionate mentor and product strategist, Lorenzo is also a recipient of Australia's Global Talent Visa for his expertise in fintech innovation. And then there's Chris Butler, Director of Product Operations at GitHub, where he focuses on reducing toil through AI-powered process automation. Chris has held product roles at Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Reality Labs, Cognizant, Waze, and more, bringing a systems-thinking approach to complex organizational and technical challenges. He's also the co-founder of the Uncertainty Project, a community exploring decision-making and strategic thinking. Outside of work, Chris is a science fiction and RPG writer and a proud father of 4 based in Oakland, California. Today on TPG Live, do product strategies scale across every product size, or does success demand a more tailored approach? And as demand for PMs grow, so does the need for consistency, clarity, and credibility. What role should the global community play in defining standards, certifying skills, and creating reliable career pathways? Join us in the chat room and at the roundtable as we discuss all this and much more coming up next on TPG Live. Before we get started, quick reminder. You can support The Product Way on Patreon and enjoy some amazing benefits. For less than the price of a coffee, and you know how I love coffee, you'll get access to real-world PM strategies and case studies, tools designed to help you solve your toughest challenges and elevate your career. Looking for even more? Higher tiers unlock exclusive benefits like one-on-one mentoring, resume feedback, shout-outs, and priority access to premium resources crafted for product professionals like you. So join us at patreon.com/theproductway to support the show and keep the content you love coming your way. Now let's get started. Your go-to platform for all things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is The Product Way. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TPG Live. Today, we're joined by Chris, Smita, and Lorenzo. Before we jump into anything here, any of you, did I get everything right? Anyone want to correct me on anything? No, silence is usually means I get. Oh, wait, what? Anything? Good? All right. Excellent. All right. So, as I like to start every show, we'll start with the question of the show tonight. And so we're going to just go around. I'm going to go in the order that I see the boxes on my screen. And so today's question of the show is what is your PM superpower, and also what's your kryptonite? So we'll just start off with you, Lorenzo.
Yeah, sure. So I think my PM superpower is building cohesive, engaged teams. So I really like the PM side of making sure everyone on the team is working towards the same vision, happy. And I think that's one of the things that I do best. And so having the team working happy. And my kryptonite, I would say, is processes. I really don't like processes, very structured things, way of doing things. And every time that, oh, now you have to go through this process to open a legal request or to get something approved, that's where I really struggle. So, yeah, I think it's a tough one.
Excellent. Smita.
Yeah, my superpower would be to connect the dots between strategy, execution, and delivery. Right. So at times when you see a whole lot going on, and it's important that you step back and take a 6,000 feet view and understand where everybody is. What is it that's going on from a 6,000 feet view, and then also be able to zoom in at the team level and understand how all these dots could be aligned, put together, so that you're able to deliver on time. Kryptonite. I'm guilty of this, of committing for a whole lot of stuff at times, and I know I can prioritize, and I would coach my teams to prioritize, but at times it gets harder to choose just one or two features, or just the delivery of one or two things at the end of the quarter. So yes, signing up for too much at times has gotten me in trouble. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, to you.
Yeah, I guess my superpower is probably bringing concepts across different domains that you may not necessarily think are applicable, but end up being very helpful. I think a lot through analogy, and so trying to apply those analogies to the way we do our work, I think ends up kind of allowing us to rethink the way we might do something based on the way other domains or practices or even industries that are not very much related to what we do. And I think my kryptonite, I mean, you already mentioned that my job is to actually reduce toil for our team, but I really hate manual repetitive toil. And I think it's kind of related to the bad parts of process, I would argue. But I really do love, I love being able to fix that, but to me, I hate it when I have to open up 3 different spreadsheets and 3 different views and copy and paste them between on a weekly basis. That is something that I just hate. So yeah, maybe that's why I'm in this job role I am.
Well, good thing you're in product operations then, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Let's see. My superpower. And as you may or may not be able to tell, I was kind of inspired by the Superman movie coming out soon, which has some pretty cool looking trailers. So, man, I hope I'm not disappointed. I need a good movie. So my superpower, I can see around corners. I've been doing this long enough that I've gotten really good at spotting patterns really quickly. Strategy, execution, team dynamics. And I generally can see what's wrong, where it's going, where things are going before most others. I say for me, especially when it comes to that, give me the chaos, the politics, the vague goals, the bloated roadmap. This what drives me is the problem solving. That's my passion. I love figuring out what actually matters, rallying the right people, getting things moving, unlocking high value momentum. That's the reason for what I do in my day job. That's why teams bring me in, and get those nice high hourly rates for helping companies when the stakes are high, things are stuck, something needs jump starting. Kryptonite, theater, and I don't mean Broadway. I mean specifically, if it looks like ceremony, smells like stalling, sounds like buzzwords, man, I need to shut that down. I have very low tolerance for performative process or shallow thinking. I want to get to the real problem, fix things quickly, move. It's a useful instinct that drives progress, pushes teams forward, but I'd say I also recognize that as being my kryptonite can also be a sort of source of discomfort, you might say, with those with those around me, because I do want to keep things moving. So I've gotten better at knowing when to lean in, when to kind of lean away. So while it's my kryptonite, I've gotten good at kind of mitigating this friction. So while Superman might have had lead, I've learned to really build strong vocal leadership teams that help me keep things steady and everyone just really operating at their best. So those were kind of my two things. As I said, Superman, all Superman style. Except I don't know if I guess he looks through the wall, not around the wall. Let's see. We've got someone else sharing that. Well, try this new feature. What does that do? Oh, well. So much for me testing a new feature. We'll try that again after it's not in beta. Someone whose name I don't know how to pronounce said their superpower is storytelling. So with that said, also, I just want to mention to people that as part TPG Live, it's a roundtable. It's a conversation. So if you're in the chat, you have a question, you have a perspective related to the topic, related to product management, post it to the chat. We'll work on getting to it. I'll work on getting as many people involved as possible in this roundtable conversation. So it's not just the people you see on camera, but we're all part of the roundtable here on TPG Live. So definitely, as thoughts come up, drop them in. And we'll try to get as many people involved in all of this as possible. So for our first topic, it's a topic I've come across a lot over the years, and it's product management in a large enterprise. And how does that compare with large enterprise, small companies, startups? How do you, as a product manager, how do you have to really adapt what you do for success? Do product strategies scale across every company size? Does success demand a more tailored approach? The day-to-day experience of being a product manager can feel completely different depending on company scale. And so I want to throw this one over to you, Chris. How would you describe the biggest difference between being a PM at a large enterprise versus a small company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is really the fact that at very large enterprises, you're dealing with this kind of like performance theater, or theater as you talk about it. There's a community I'm part of that talks about it as like kayfabe, which if people are not familiar with that term, it actually comes from kind of professional wrestling within the United States. And so kayfabe is the kind of like belief in the thing, even though it's kind of fake. And so there's a lot of times where being in a meeting, being deferential to someone, letting other groups speak. A lot of the time, politics across different organizations becomes much more important. Especially, like at Google, for example, there's a very consensus-driven culture, and so that has a lot of presuppositions about the way you end up doing your work. When I've worked in very small companies, even my own, I think it ends up being much more about personalities because you have way fewer people to deal with. And so those personalities end up really driving a lot of the way you interoperate with those people within your team. And so I think the thing that maybe like transcends all of this is I still think that product management is really all about this idea of how do we manage uncertainty. And that uncertainty inside of a large organization may be more about the politics of it and the way that we end up working with other teams rather than the end customer sometimes. And in small companies, it's still that uncertainty of do we actually know what we think we know? And so that's what I'd say. I'd say like communication, alignment, this ability to do decision making, asking great questions. Those are all things that I think that product managers need to do kind of no matter what. But those are the biggest differences I found, and I mean, we worked together at Cognizant, which was probably the largest company I ever worked at, and then stepped down to Google as far as size of company. And so I would just say, like, I think it is very interesting when it comes to that difference between kind of politics versus personality. And there's definitely a relationship between those. Like, they're not completely separate, but I think the politics ends up being about the personalities of senior leaders and the way you work with other people on teams, versus in a very small place, it's really about those direct relationships, the kind of like biases and assumptions that those people bring to those types of things more often.
Gotcha. Same question to you, Smita.
I'm certainly agreeing with whatever Chris said. Yes, +1.
Yeah, whatever he said. Yeah.
Yes, but I would like to, I've seen enough of, in the big enterprises that I could say that there's a lot more focus on alignment. You want all these teams, all these different orgs to align first, before you could do anything, right? So most of that energy goes to that alignment in a bigger organization. Again, politics, we call it dynamics, right? You got to understand the dynamics, lot of diplomacy that goes into it rather than real work, right? Trying to solve a problem for the customer. So that is most of the time where, you're going to spend in a large organization, whereas in a startup, you're going to focus more on solving the problem. You'll be talking to the customer more than as a product manager in a bigger org, right? So I feel like that has taken me to think like, if I had to go back to product management, would I be like really happy doing what I would be doing as a 0 to 1 product manager or a traditional product manager, right? And that's where, when you choose an org, a small or big, you're kind of looking at the pros and cons of it. So, yeah.
So Lorenzo, next. Oh, go ahead. Did you have more you were saying?
No, I was just handing it off to Lorenzo.
Oh, Lorenzo, I was going to progress it a little bit in that when we're looking at large companies, well, early roles can shape a product manager's mindset, habits, confidence for years to come. So I guess from your perspective, do you think it's better to start your PM career in a large company, a small company? Why?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think it would be better to start at a small company, although I started in a large one. So when I look back now and see the experience that I had and the experiences other peers, PMs had, I said, yeah, maybe having started on a small company would have been better because the skills that you need to be successful at those two different company sizes are very different, and also the speed of things. So as Chris and Smita mentioned, on larger organizations, you have to spend much more time on alignment, making sure everyone is at the same page before progressing with whatever you need to progress. So usually things are slower. So you go through that cycle last time, but at the same time, you're developing your communication and alignment skills. While on smaller organizations, you usually is going through the product process more often. So in the same, let's say 3 months, you actually had to go through different problems, think how to solve it, try different features, see what sticks, what didn't stick. And then you're learning about the process. You're learning how to do better products and not so much the communication. So starting, I think it's really important to have experience on both. So maybe starting on small, learning about the product process, how to listen to the customer, how to have a customer input, being all the way on the process to a product feature and then the product strategy, be really good at it. And then when you go to a bigger organization, you can do that, but also develop your communication and alignment skills, having a very strong foundation, I think would be the best path. But at the same time, on bigger organizations, usually you have more structure and bigger teams. So you can rely on people from marketing, you can rely on people from data. So you can have a more complete approach, while on a small organization, you as the PM needs to do everything. So that's also a good learning, because then as a PM, you need to know a bit of marketing, a bit of data, a bit of engineering, so you can kind of using these different hats. So yeah, I think starting on a small one would be more beneficial.
Chris, I know you've got something you want to add
Yeah,
here.
I have like a dissenting viewpoint here. I think that actually larger organizations are better for new employees. And the reason why is, at least traditionally, and this was, again, when I started a long time ago, I won't mention the number of years, but like larger organizations actually had a lot more effort being put into actually training you, mentoring you, putting you into a position where you could be successful. And so that's why, like, I think for a long time, large organizations were better. Now, to your point about like being involved in a lot more, I think actually the problem with startups, at least very small organizations, is that you end up doing a lot of job roles that are outside of what usually would be considered the traditional practice for product management. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, it's good to be able to understand how you just kind of like need to do anything to get the job done, right? Like, I've worked at many roles in kind of smaller organizations where I bridged a lot of different practices, usually product management, business development, things like that, right? Or but I think like one interesting thing is actually about this idea of kind of rotating through different types of organizations as a starting point. I think getting started at a big company, getting those types of like not only help in understanding what is valued there, but I also think that, for example, I think every product manager should actually take a stint as like a consultant. And the reason why is that it helps you refine an awful lot of things like communication styles, dealing with stakeholders. And I mean, there's like large consultancies like Cognizant, which is an example of that. But I would even say like smaller consultancies. I worked for a group called Philosophy out of New York that was very small design consultancy. And our turnaround on projects was in the range of 8 to 12 weeks. And so being a product manager in that context meant that I got to see not only many different kind of industries, many different organizational styles, but there were so many different problems that we had to deal with in that point that it gave me a much larger library of being able to understand. Whereas in a large company or even a startup, you're slogging along for a very long time. Now, Steve Jobs thinks that consultants are not worth anything, but I disagree with him in the sense that I do think it helps train you across a lot of different contexts. So I would argue that there's that kind of added thing for developing your career is to be able to see like a wide breadth of things, and consulting agencies, those types of things actually offer that a lot.
I think he was coming at it from those consultants that just
Yeah,
tell
the
you
Big
what
Four.
to do and don't do anything.
That's right.
It's interesting that you said that. I think with respect to large companies, it's interesting because I think if you're a large company in tech, I think that's not a bad place to start. I think if you're a large company in general that does have product managers, let me, like, for example, I'll give you, like, I didn't start at Viacom. At some point I ended up there. There was no training. There was no mentoring. There was also, I'd say 50% of the job was almost debate as to what the role of product even was supposed to be in a media company. And I'm not saying it's like that for all companies, but I think tech companies have have the best foundation when it comes to product management, especially when you're California centric. I think as you move away from that, like even I'd say tech in New York City, especially if you go back 10, 20 years, like the further back you go, like it was much less mature.
Well, I mean, that's maybe my point, is that I started at Microsoft in the Bay Area, which was not, we were in a satellite office of 5,000 people, right? And so in that particular case, there were so many resources that were available to kind of like help me understand what the role was in some way. And I think like a lot of companies that are going through or have gone through like digital kind of transformations, definitely, I think they're, when I moved to Hong Kong for 2 years, I would meet people at parties and I would say I was a product manager, and they're like, oh, you're in IT. That makes sense. I get it. And like that idea of kind of older businesses that are then bolting on or trying to figure out technology, I could totally see that as being that type of thing. I do want to also bring up that for people that are entering the job market right now, there's a huge kind of trend of people saying they're not going to hire junior people anymore. And I think that's a huge mistake. Because I think like not only they bring another viewpoint.
Well, you don't need junior people. You got AI, right?
That's right.
And the people that you hire later, they'll just learn somehow.
That's right. But I think we should reframe this as, when we start to apply things like AI, or I believe an awful lot that even for like agentive technologies, it ends up being a group of people that are supported by all of these agents, that a more junior person can also have an agent that is like helping them, right, longer term. And I think the way that I've seen like the benefit of this type of work is actually providing critique in a way that is very low risk, Whereas before, the critique I would get would be from my manager, which is high risk, right? Or the critique from the rest of the team, which then it kind of impacts the way that they trust me and my reputation. And so I think there's like huge opportunities for us to utilize these types of technologies in a way that is really beneficial for junior employees. I think it's a real mistake to only hire senior PMs and up. I think that's bad. So yeah.
Yeah, they're also all stuck in their ways.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go for it.
I do think if you're talking about, the topic of whether I should join a bigger company or a smaller company, are we still on that? Okay. So I feel like that it has a little bit to do with your career goals as well as your personality. Because if your career goal is to really, if you really want to be a 0 to 1 product manager, a small, medium-sized company would be a great place. Of course, you could join a big company and start on a new product that they're, they want to launch a product and they'll give you all the things you need and all that. Definitely that would work also, but a little bit more on, this is my career goal and I just want to start here and head that way. Some people have that in their mind where they want to choose right at the beginning. So that also plays a role depending on, what your career goals are, as well as personality, right? If you are used to adapting quickly, you would be a great fit for a startup, right? Because you're literally learning from, fire hose. You're getting everything and more, and you have to take those decisions quickly. And if you're not able to adapt, then you're not a good fit for a startup unless, if you like structure, you like processes. Large organizations already have that in place. So I feel like a little bit of that also makes sense while you're choosing, if you have a choice, just to look out for yourself, kind of.
Well, but that's what I worry about for a lot of these situations is that there's a lot of times where like the sink or swim mentality for PMs is actually detrimental to their development. Mm-hmm. And I mean there are even big companies that believe in that. Like I would say, Meta, they have like a very specific way that they end up culling people from their organization that do not meet the requirements, but they don't really spend that much time on actually developing them. And so I think that's the thing I'm concerned with is that, yes, you should, like, learning to drink from the fire hose is a really particular way of doing things, especially within startups. But I always worry that, like, we're not giving the space for people to actually learn. And so that would be my concern about this idea of like sink or swim mentality. I've bristled at it an awful lot of times because we're not like actually trying to grow people. Then we're just trying to either they meet the requirements and that's good, or we fire them basically. And I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. But that's something that a lot of I wouldn't say the newer generation, but a lot of the people that are in the market right now, and depending on what's going on, they're just kind of like really kind of scared, to even. I talk with so many of these folks like that are struggling to find the right opportunity because they're trying to spend so much time picking, choosing, and all of that, and it takes them a long time to find a job. So.
Yeah, I think I think it's interesting because I was coming at it from a slightly different place, I think, when I wrote the question. But it's interesting because I would argue a startup is probably a good place to a good way to get into product management. And then I would then go on to say, if you have a seasoned product person in the startup, not that you're the only product person in the startup, it can be a positive, constructive experience. That said, I think it goes for large companies as well as small, and that's why, like Chris, when we work together, like I spend so much time on training and expectations, and like because that to me is one of like the missing pieces almost everywhere. That there's no training, there's no enablement, and I'm speaking to all sizes now, right? And you're missing the training, you're missing the enablement, you're missing clear expectations as to what someone needs to do to get from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4.
Well, and maybe one other thing I've seen as a pattern inside of like startups is that even as someone that was like kind of mid-career for product management, I would join, if I tried to join a startup where there was a very strong kind of leader, I was relegated to kind of more project managery style tasks, and it was very hard to kind of like assume control of the product as a product manager when there's a really strong founder. And so the problem, like I totally get what you're saying about like maybe junior employees, they maybe have a benefit of the fact that they are considered to be junior, so they see and try to model the senior leader's behavior within that organization. But I would say that like it's really hard sometimes when there's super strong product leaders or design leaders. I would say product and design leaders are the hardest ones, I think, for product managers to come in underneath inside of a startup, right? Because they have a very clear vision about the way they want the product to work. Whereas like, you know, if you're working with like a sales leader, they're probably, well, one, I think they're more likely to be successful as a startup, just because sales leaders are more about that type of thing. They're trying to get.
They'll be more hands off on the product as well.
Yeah, they'll be more hands off the product. Well, they'll be more like, they may treat you as a professional service organization. That's the anti-pattern.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think to what you're saying though, if don't go in where you're the first product. You've never done product before. Don't go in as that first product person reporting to the CEO. I promise you that won't work. 100%. It's not going to work, right? Like we all know, we know that. And so anyone listening who doesn't know that, now you do. You're welcome. You don't go, but like with a startup, like I said, you need to have a strong leader who if you're interviewing, like we feel like you can learn from them. But yeah, you did sway me a little bit more towards the larger company. But like I said, like I think large in tech, almost certainly you're going to get more of that mentorship. It's kind of more built in. If you're, and the further you kind of get from like that sweet GUI center, the more it's going to be challenging to the point where a lot of companies don't have that structure. And I think you raise a good point on that sink or swim. And it fits even better in our second topic. So we can definitely kind of loop back and talk more about it. Lorenzo, so even experienced PMs often face unexpected challenges when changing org size. When you've gone from big to small to big, what are some of those things that surprise you most when transitioning between those environments?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, and it's kind of connected with what we are just talking about right now, is that the size of the company matters, but the culture of the company, I think it's even more important, because you can have a large organization with the right culture that is actually going to empower the PM and going to develop you as a PM to become a better one. But you can be on a large organization with the, let's say, wrong culture that won't support you. So all the benefits or the downsides of being in the different sizes, they're going to be like even bigger because of the company's culture. So yeah, being in a place that from a very large organization with a very strong product culture, moving to a smaller organization with not so much culture, I felt that I was actually more empowered and kind of felt more as a smaller organization PM on the bigger organization because of how the organization was structured to make that possible. So I think the first thing is when you're changing companies, everyone talks about culture, and we feel that culture is just this thing that, it's on the website. But it's actually really, really important to understand how that translates on the day-to-day, not about how it's written, but how that impacts your work on the day-to-day. So, and that being said, when transitioning from one side to the other, I think, let's say both companies have the right culture. Then it's if you try to treat the work as the same, you're gonna fail. So if you're successful in a bigger company as a PM, and you go to the smaller company now and try to do the same things, that's not gonna work. So you really need to adapt how you work, where you're focused, how you spend your energy, and in which of the boxes of the PM work to make you being successful. So yeah, the same recipe won't work on different sizes of organizations, let's say.
Smita, surprises on your what's surprised you on those transitions?
I don't think I was surprised. I was agreeing with him, but I feel like I was fortunate to when I started as a product manager in my first gig. I felt like I was fortunate enough to have a good leader, and as Lorenzo mentioned, culture makes a big difference, with companies as well as.
Took me almost a decade to find a good leader to learn from.
Exactly. And I felt like I was lucky enough to have a good leader that actually empowered me to do my job. And it was really, I did drink from the fire. I did learn that way. There wasn't much guidance, but there was a lot of good users, and my managing director was great. So I do feel like, sometimes being at the right place at the right time in your career also helps, but that is not by choice. It's like you have to keep looking for it. You cannot give up on that. If you want to be in product, keep doing product, be passionate about it, then, keep doing what you're passionate about without putting too many bells and whistles on it. Not like it has to be this way, it has to be that way. Just try to work with what you have in the given situation, because you're going to do best if you're passionate about it. And, keep looking for the right people and you'll find them, but keep working on it, I would say. And regardless of whether it's a small or a big organization. So that's something that I would want to, say, like, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
When you're the environment, different environments have different kinds of trade-offs. Whether it's process, autonomy, influence, there's trade-off. What are the trade-offs that someone should be cognizant of between large versus small companies with respect to that product management role? Chris?
I mean, I think one of the things that I would argue when it comes to kind of those trade-offs that you will most come across is really around resourcing. And so who is actually part of your cross-functional team, right? Like, I think Facebook does a great job, or, again, I call it Facebook because that's when I was there. But like the idea of having a data scientist embedded with the team, having a content strategist embedded with the team, having a user researcher embedded with the team, you're able to learn from these other practices, and they support you in a way that is really beneficial. I think when we talk about smaller organizations, it is much more about how do we basically move faster than the rate that we will die. And that is like a really, really important aspect of being at a startup that you have to be very cognizant of, that at a large company, there's different problems with the survivability of your team. I would say that, like, whenever I've been in a large organization, I haven't really fit into those organizations, but I find a way to do that is like beneficial to both the organization and myself. So I think I'm like a person that should be in a startup, but keeps on getting dragged back into large organizations and trying to find that place. Yeah.
Oh man, Lorenzo, what's your take?
Yeah, I think I can agree. Like, there are different benefits on being both. I think it needs to be more connected to your personality and what you want for yourself. Me personally, the things that are present on small companies are more fulfilling for me. I think you can see more of an impact. You can really, see how your work is changing things. And for most of the people, that's what's gonna stick. But at the same time, you never know what's coming next. Like, you don't know if the company is gonna be there and if you're gonna have your job in the next year. So there's, like, I think for me, that's the biggest trade-off. But being honest, when you look today with big techs and the amount of layoffs we have been having, you're not so safe as well just by saying, oh, I'm on a big corporation, I'm done. Like, I don't need to do anything else. That's not true anymore. So I lean more towards this small company. And just as a side note, I think probably everyone here has heard about Landy's newsletter. And I think a month ago they had the state of technology and product people happiness. And there's a very interesting graph of like the sizes of the companies and how people enjoy working there. And there's kind of direct relationship with the smaller the company, people feel more enjoyment on being there because they see more of their impact. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it sits for me.
Yeah, if you can send me the link, I'll share it out with the audience afterwards.
Sure.
So leadership, it's not one size fits all, right? So different orgs reward different skills, behaviors. You have different skill sets that are needed. And Lorenzo, you spoke to that a little bit already. Smita, what sort of leadership skills have you seen become more or less useful depending on company size?
Let's just talk about big organizations. I have seen the most troublesome leadership skills are, like micromanaging, controlling. Just hurts a lot. Hurts the team's, progress, their leadership team's progress, right? I would say the ones that we want leaders to develop would be more of, giving more autonomy to your teams. Empower them to be able to choose, what they want to work on depending on the data. Try to look at more facts rather than, oh, my brother-in-law wasn't able to log in, and the EVP just comes down to your desk and says, can you look at this? I mean, is there even a bug that's entered, right? So let's look at data, more of, behavior analytics, take into consideration that. The more educated leaders, educated in terms of the product perspective, the product model, that would help a lot for product organizations. If you can't hire somebody who is, who's worked in product, please try to, look for leaders who are willing to adapt and learn and grow with the organization, with the product. So I would say somebody who may not have been, doing that stuff for years, but is wanting to and willing to, and is in a probably a little bit junior role, but is wanting to do that job, is a good candidate for those leadership roles. Adaptability is really important. Empathy is so important, right? Empathy for your people, for your customers, regardless of what level you're at, right?
Wait, so we only need empathy in large companies? That's great.
No, no. I was training in terms
You have
of
to get stuff done in small startups, okay?
You're right. No time for empathy there.
You guys are good at pulling my leg, so that's good. Yes. So in small organizations, also, what happens is, especially startups, everything that's shiny needs to be worked on. So prioritization is a good skill that you should have as a leader. Understanding, your budget constraints, understanding your talent constraints. You may not have a designer per team. You may not even have a designer when you start, right? So understanding what is possible is way more important than, what we want to do. We want to go to the moon, but reality check is so important, right? So yes, empathy at that level is also important. Educated, data literate leaders are more needed today. We do want them to give more autonomy, but also bring in a little bit more structure. We want that startup to also have some kind of process, to kind of not get into the habit of let's go build that feature tomorrow and the one next day, and you just keep piling up those features in a startup rather than focusing on one thing, right? So those skills are important no matter which size organization you're part of.
So Chris, as you could tell, I was going to you. because it knew I was going to you. So, Chris, how, like, on the spectrum of skills, right? So, when you're looking at a large company, small company, same question to you. Like, what skills become more important, less important in large versus small organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a really tough question because, I guess the idea of are you able to play the game in a large organization? Are you able to adapt to the way that people do things inside that large organization is really important. Because, in some small organizations, if you have the personality of like a tech lead where they really don't need that much like guidance when it comes to things, there's not a requirement to give them like highly detailed specs and a designed red line or something like that. And so I think that's what I would say is like it really, because of that fact that you need to learn how to adapt to not only the way things are that they're said they are done in a large organization, but also the shadow systems that end up being created to actually get things done. And so at a very large place, like I think that's maybe my number one way of really understanding what's going on is talking to people about and having them walk me through the way they do something. And a lot of the time it's a lot of direct communication. It's a lot of direct kind of relationships, but they have to also do these other processes that are more from the standpoint of like trying to get apples to apples across the entire organization. So that's what I would say is like, I definitely think that, it's much easier to just abandon bad processes inside of a startup because nothing is really set in stone. Whereas to remove a bad process or a process that is no longer like we don't remember why we started doing this thing and we don't know why it's of value anymore, it becomes really hard to remove that within a large organization. And it's because that there's like an accumulation of all these times that someone has messed up, like risk reduction types of things that really cause you to then have this like very complicated set of machinery. Whereas startups, they're much more likely to just like abandon something the moment that it's not working anymore. So I think it's another thing I've found.
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to just kind of pick one, I think I would be looking at, like, you've got politics in large companies and small companies, but in a small company, if you got a lot of politics, leave. Because that's
if you're
not
like
gonna,
in between two of the founders and they're
Yeah.
arguing and they're not talking to each other, you should get out of there as soon as possible. It's
I was
like
in a
bad
situation
relationship.
with 3 of the founders. And then at another company, 4. So, yay. So leave. And also, it's just unhealthy at that stage. In a larger company, there are politics, and it's not necessarily so overt. I think, so to me, when you're in a larger company, you have to make sure you understand, you have to do this everywhere, but even more so in a larger company, understand what people's needs are, the internal stakeholders, what's driving them, what they're really see themselves as responsible for, and it's about building consensus and cohorts and communities of support within the organization. You don't have to have agreement, but you have to have support for your vision and strategy and what you're trying to accomplish, and kind of be able to establish kind of that trust in your product leadership. And so I think that's much more important in a larger company. In a smaller company, things can move so quickly. It's okay. You get a lot of grace to do things right or wrong and all that, as long as you can kind of keep cutting through, as long as the politics doesn't emerge and you can kind of get everyone get in the room. There's 5 of us. Like, let's look at the data. Okay, you're right. All right, let's do that. So it's a little bit easier to push through, but I think you kind of that consensus building, not agreement, but consensus, getting people at least on the same page, building community. I think that to me is that skill that when you're going to a larger company, if I'm picking just one, that really for me stood out.
Well, yeah, and I think like consensus is actually a negative thing in some ways, I would argue. Because like we should be giving consent to people. Consent over consensus is what the terminology is. Amazon calls it disagree and commit. But the idea of that, like, there are people that are the decision maker for something and they should make the decision and they should pull in the information.
Yes. I knew it's not the right word. Like that's why I was leaning more towards community. Like
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not saying, hey, we all have to agree on this. No,
That's right. Yeah,
that's
right.
that's not what I'm trying to say. But the word that I wanted still eludes me. So that's why I was saying consensus dash community as my awkward thing. But yeah, I agree with you completely. It's not about, oh, we all have to agree on this. There's so like that product person has a domain, they own that domain. They make the decision on that. Marketing same, sales same, designer same, all that. Everyone's got their role. And if you're in a place where everyone has to agree or there's a vote, run. It's not gonna. No one wants to see that. But yeah, that's why I was straining over the word consensus. I still can't find the right word. I'll find it in an hour or two.
Well, based on the fact that I do so much around like decision making, it is a trigger word for me at this point. So that's the reason why I had to jump on you about it. But yeah, I get what you're saying, right?
Yeah. No, and you do. I'm sure it's somewhere on your website, the Uncertainty Project. So I'm sure somewhere is somewhere on that website is the word I'm looking for. So before I kind of transition to the next piece, does anyone else is there any other topic or any other concept that I haven't touched on that people should be thinking about, people should be aware of, that would be helpful when people are looking at product management, maybe deciding to join a large company or a small company, or understanding what skills they need to build, or any other things any other kind of aspects that might come up when they're looking at large versus small. Anyone want to add anything to this topic, or should I put a fork in it? All right,
there's just one quick one that I think is when you're looking at these different sizes of organizations, usually the financial side is also very different. So it's something you need to consider, like, do I want to join something now to have a big paycheck now, but that won't have the possible upside in the future? Or I'm okay to take the risk of not get paid so much right now, but then if the company I am at gonna grow and I can grow with it and get some stock options and stuff like that, that's a massive upside, but there is also a risk on the short term. So I think that's something people also need to, if you have the possibility and you can take the risk, just wait, like, yeah, it's worth or not for me.
All right, I gotta ask this. So is anyone here gonna argue and say, hey, startups, like, go for a startup, take those options? Can anyone convince me that that's a good decision?
I would just say that there was a research study that looked at this, and they said that based on the chances of actually hitting it big, like it's way less than 1 in 5 or something like that. It's probably even
it's that high.
It's that high. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, well, for Silicon Valley startups, like there's always someone that knows that VC that wants to buy their thing because they're all friends and stuff like that.
Well, let's go with this.
Yeah. Okay, but no, I'm saying, like, my point is that, like, working at a large company, it will always actually make slightly more. But there's something called ergodicity, which is this fact that, like, your individual experience is different based on that. I mean, it's like, to explain ergodicity in a very, like, simple way, it's like, we surveyed a bunch of people that do Russian roulette, and 5 out of 6 people had a great time, and 1 out of 6 people didn't respond. And so it must be an amazing game to play, right? Like, so like, ergodicity says that, like, your personal experience is one that probably matters the most to you. But on average, working at a large company with RSUs nowadays, no longer options as much, you will technically make slightly more on a yearly, even if you have an exit, right? Versus a startup, because of the chances of that. So that's what I would just say.
Yeah, I'd also add, like, let's build on that magic equation we've got there. So you got 1 in 5. Now you got the company strikes it big, they get acquired. Once they're acquired, what's the next layer of that I need to factor in of how much they're going to dilute the crap out of the employees versus the founders, and the acquiring company and all that. Like, maybe get 10,000 out of it, 10,000 bucks
Well, yeah,
out
if
of
you're
it.
over like the 100th employee for like a unicorn acquisition, you're probably not really making that much. Like 100 or
Even
something.
earlier, there's a good chance you've got that stock that's gonna get diluted
Yeah.
into subatomic size. Anyway, as you can tell, my perspective and my life
I've only
experience.
out of all the startups I was part of, right? Like one only exited, and that was Waze. But I left before the acquisition.
No.
And while it was a good exit, it was not. It was very nice, but it was not life changing, is what I would say. Like I still have to work for a living. I mean, I have 4 children, so maybe that causes
Wow,
that.
there you go.
But anyways, like I would just say like it was great. I'm very happy that it happened, but it was not life changing.
Yeah.
I was probably like the 80th or 90th employee in that case.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, no, I've had good exits, but I haven't. I've also had, oh my God, others, where I've been I've been the founder. So I'll tell you. So before I go, I want to go to the trivia section, but there was kind of more of an open-ended question that I did want to raise to the roundtable right now, and just kind of I'll just go around and get everyone's take on it. And so Jaya Lakshmi. I got to really increase the font on that monitor there. Says there's so much competition at large companies for entry-level roles. People from various backgrounds apply to the same roles. And I saw, Chris, you made a small comment, but I thought we could all maybe add to this. How do you stand out from the crowd, especially when you're applying to a lot of these entry-level roles? Let me start with you, Chris, since you already had a few thoughts on it.
I do think it's bad that APM roles are harder to get into than the most exclusive college nowadays. Like that's bad for the companies that are running those programs, in my opinion. Yeah. But I would argue that the thing that people tend to value, because product management is such like a tacit knowledge based like skill, which means that experience really matters a lot. That actually doing while you're in school, I think internships are really powerful. I would say that volunteering for open source projects that need product manager skills, the idea of doing pro bono work, but really anything you can do to get something on your resume that shows that you've been a product manager for something, even if it's your own startup, right? Like, which again, I don't understand why people have gaps in their resumes anymore or on LinkedIn, because you can literally start a company just by saying it is a company. Right, like that's literally what you can do now, is you can say I am unemployed and I have this new company that is this idea that I'm working on, right? And so I would just argue that like you should be trying to get as much experience as possible, because it shows that you are building this knowledge that is, I think, very impactful. When I was at Microsoft at first, we would kind of jokingly say that like, and I was told this, by the way, that right when I got started, that product managers were not really worth anything for the first 2 years of their lives. And the reason why was because they had not built up that experience yet. And so I would just say like anything you can do to get that experience, whether it is on your own or with other groups, I would say that's the most powerful thing.
Lorenzo, same. How can you stand out?
Yeah, I think that what Chris just said is really important. So try to learn before you get the job, and to prove that you will have at least something to bring to the table once you're there. Of course, you won't have all the knowledge, but it can help you. I think trying to be part of the community is also a way. So being here, like you're not a PM, but if you're here on this chat, maybe it's a good start. There are different places. You have meetups, you have different organizations that run things like this. So that can help you connect to someone who may know someone that then get you this first interview. It won't get you there, but can help you open some doors. So I think trying to be active on the community is also another thing that can help you a lot.
Smita, anything to add?
I would love to add something, and this is unconventional way to say this, but you could take a certification of any kind in product that you're trying to pursue. For example, you want to be a product manager, you can take a certification as long as they allow you to be in that certification training course with the others that are going to be professionals. And if you take it from companies that actually do training online, you might be able to connect with, national, international talent that's out there. Make your connections. You would be able to learn from them. You would definitely be, connected to them on LinkedIn, and continue the networking process, as well as learn from them. If you have zero experience, that would be a good place to start, to kind of learn from them and understand. As you're giving an interview, hopefully you'll get an interview, fingers crossed. But show your knowledge of the subject, and be the person who stands out, who knows more than what everybody else in your class knows.
Okay, hold on. So are you saying? If I'm understanding this correctly, this is. All right, let's see if I'm following you correctly. Are you saying to get that you're recommending people get certified, not for the certification, but for the networking of meeting other people and cross-pollinating with other people in the similar space? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying get the certification to have a base foundational knowledge of the subject, right? Of that, if it's product management, whatever, side you want to go to. But I'm trying to say that, yes, please pursue that as also an opportunity to connect with the professionals in that space. So that puts you in, on that table. They're discussing things as they do these activities, and this hopefully hands-on activities are happening in those certification trainings. And yes, definitely do that. Why not?
We'll definitely get into this more in the second topic, but I'll say that's probably the first potential, I guess, viable reason I've ever heard of someone getting a certification would be for the networking. In general, anyone who knows me, anyone who's heard me speak for decades now, I've taught, I've created curriculum at lots of universities, other places. I'd say if you want to take it for learning, cool. The teacher can teach it to you. You think you can learn the topic, and you're doing it just for learning. Great. Never. I will also always tell people, never get certified to get a job. I will never hire someone that will never have an impact on the interview process, on the screening process, if someone has or doesn't have a certification. And so, like I said, do it for educational. But I like this. I like this a lot for networking and kind of finding other ways to get in touch with people across the field. It's unique. And it's the first good reason I've heard of to tell someone to get certified. So I'm kind of giddy with excitement on
works.
This one.
It works, believe me. I've helped a few people with that, but yes, it works. Yes.
That's awesome. So Byron, the product enthusiast, asked, and I'll answer this. I think I can tackle this one quickly. Asked, what if the opportunity came up at a startup for a product management role and not a large organization? Then take it. Done. Easy. Like when it comes to product management, the hardest thing is getting that first job that says you're a product manager. Once you have that product manager title, you're part of the club. And after that one, it gets a lot easier. But getting that first one, getting in the door, and that's also why a lot of time I'll say, hey, go reach out to startups. For that same reason that Chris said it was a negative, I'll say, because you know what? They might let you wear a few hats. But sometimes you might be wearing the product hat, so at least you might get that title. You might get some of that experience, but you get your foot in the door. So if you can't get it at a large company, that's fine. Take a small one. If you get anything that says product manager, take it. Forget the industry, especially if you're starting out. Like, you just want to get your foot in the door, start, as everyone's already said, build that experience up. So don't worry about it. So, all right, that's it. We're gonna do the trivia section of the show today. Right now. Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna ask the question. I'm gonna say it nice and clear. I'll repeat it twice even. But here's the thing. Don't say the answer. If you're in the off camera, don't type it. You're on camera. Don't say it if you think you know the answer. But feel free to talk amongst yourselves about things related to it if you want. But don't say the answer. We will get to that at the end of the show, and we'll go into a little bit more there. So I don't want to spoil it for everyone else. And see, Chris is so good at not saying the answer. He removed any temptation by running away from the screen. So I appreciate that. So with that said, our trivia.
Which company is famously associated with coining the term dogfooding for using your own product before lunch? Once again, which company is famously associated with coining the term dogfooding for using your own product before lunch?
All right. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Do not say the answer. Anybody, please, don't do it. All right. Does anyone want to say anything other than the answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we say drinking our own champagne now rather than dog
Oh,
fooding.
jeez.
So
Did you read my answer notes? You're just ruining some of my fun. Oh man.
I didn't actually read them. So yeah, that's just my natural response.
Jeez. I don't know what I'm going to say now. All right.
And by the way, we do call them previews more than anything. We've stopped using the terminology dog fooding in our domain a lot of the time. I think dog fooding does make more sense sometimes, but I would argue that like preview is what we end up doing more.
I'm not talking to Chris anymore. Just block him off my screen here. All right. Anyway, all right. Thank you, Chris. Thanks a lot. I mean, thank you. No, that's good. That's good. And that might have actually helped some folks out. So that's great. So we're going to go to our second topic here, and we're talking about elevating the standards and career pathways of product management. So we poked at this a little bit. We talked a little bit about certification and other related topics here. As demand for product managers grow, so does the need for consistency, clarity, credibility, and I've been having a lot of offline debates with folks as to what extent is there consistency or not in product management at this point, and what role should the global community play in defining the standards, certifying, creating reliable career pathways. So even after all this time, product management often feels like a field still trying to define itself, or at least that's what people say. So does product management still lack consistent standards compared to other disciplines? Let me go to you, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I would say does, but probably is more related to the sector of the company than and maybe the region, because I think, let's say, across the big techs, a PM on Amazon, a PM on Microsoft, Google, Meta, yeah, they will have different things, but it's kind of the same. Like even the process to get into is very similar. Okay. But then you have these companies that everyone now needs to be tech. And you're not a tech company, but you need a PM. Why? Because you need a PM. You don't actually know exactly why you need a PM, but you need.
That's a company I want to work at.
Yeah. And then suddenly you start seeing these companies with a lot of PM roles open. And then when you actually look at what they need from the PM, it's not a PM role. Like it could be a project management role. It could be something completely different, but it's still labeled as a PM, because right now, if they don't have a PM, they won't be successful. And that's where I think, that's the narrative, at least. And that's where I think the problem lies. So a lot of companies that may not have to have a PM, or they do, but they don't know what to do with a PM, just take the name and shape to whatever they think that they need at that point. And that may have nothing to do with actually being a PM. So that's pretty common, I would say, to see. Not so much on big tech and tech first companies, but yeah, I see that a lot. And I think that's detrimental to the whole PM name and PM career, let's say.
Smita.
Yes. One
Yes to
thing,
what? Yes, what?
one thing we do, I agree that we do need standards around some things. One thing we do need to do is start sharing within the product communities. Like sometimes our definition of some of the things that product managers do is way more different than what some companies do.
All right,
Like
give me specifics here.
sometimes product managers are supposed to be project managers. That's not what product managers are supposed to be, but that's actually expected of the product managers in some companies.
Well,
I have
I want to push back there. So you're saying wear two hats. That to me isn't saying that as a product manager that my role isn't clear. You're just saying, hey, in addition to doing the product management, could you also do the project management? I would say, like, it's clear what the product manager and the role of product manager is. Just like, hey, we don't have a designer, product manager. You know how Photoshop works, right? Can you do some of that Photoshop-y stuff, right? So it's a similar idea. It's like, this as a product manager, you're talking to customers or you're working, you're trying to figure out what the risks are. But then you have, can you also wear this other hat? So I guess that's my pushback on that, in that isn't the role still clearly defined? You can, again, feel free to disagree with me. That's what this is for.
Yeah, and I will disagree definitely.
Well, you're wrong. No, go ahead.
One thing, there's more to being a product designer than just using a Photoshop. I know you gave an example, but just saying, like, there's a lot more to being a product designer than just using a app to get manipulate pictures or whatever. But the reason I have that pushback is, like, it's okay to wear two hats, but if it is going to take you away from your job, your responsibilities as a product manager, I'm not going to be comfortable, making that product manager go through that process of, doing this as well as that job. And then at some point, one of those, especially project management, depending on how big the product is or how big the project management effort is, it's going to take over that product manager's time. And, those responsibilities are going to, like,
right. But I guess I'm not debating whether or not it's a good idea or not. It's not a good idea to wear two hats.
Yes.
We're on that page. What I'm saying is, what a product manager is clearly understood. You're just also saying, hey, by the way, also do this other person's job that doesn't exist as well. And so that's the question: is, like, are the standards and what product management is that consistent across?
It's not, and that's why I'm saying, like, we need to at some point have some kind of body where organizations, leaders come together and start setting some standards around what's expected of a product manager, rather than just piling up stuff on them. Also, go ahead.
Okay, wait, hold on. So I'm going to say, here's what's expected of a product manager, and by the way, also do what's expected of a project manager. So now, like, that's how a startup would work. That's how a lot of other things would work. What am I missing? Or Chris, jump in here. Give me your thoughts.
I have like a lot of opinions about this, but I would just say, I do think that the role of the product manager is something that's not always titled as the product manager, right? And so what I would say is, like, the idea of time boxing decision making, facilitating decision making, figuring out, like, what is it we need to know right now versus what it's okay for us to, like, hold off until later. Those are skill sets that I think tend to deal with a lot of, like, I guess, parsing of uncertainty and dancing with uncertainty. And I think the problem is that not everybody actually has the same definition of a product manager. And I've seen this across, like, major groups, I think we end up becoming overly obsessed with like artifacts. So the idea of the ownership of the strategy, which again is not really a strategy usually, but I will digress on that point. And then there's the roadmap, there's specification or requirements, right? But there's a lot of other roles that also overlap with these types of artifacts. And so I think one of the problems, especially with the idea of like overlapping those types of like project managery type of positions and product managery positions, is that there's a tension that is lacking inside that team. And that key tension is really about this idea as the project manager is someone that is reducing risk for the project versus the product manager, which is pushing innovation. Because everything that we do as product managers, if we're not creating something new, if we're just like replicating what we have, we don't need really product managers. We don't need people asking hard questions and trying to discover new truths and using abductive logic to leap to the next thing. We just need people to copy what other people have. And so that's why like I think there are certain teams that, you know, like infrastructure teams, platform teams, they actually probably don't need product managers, right? Like it's fairly well defined what that team is supposed to do. The product works the way it does, and what we need to do is just like reduce all risk, remove all of the problems, and increase optimization. Whereas like for teams that are earlier on, right, they do need a product manager to be constantly questioning, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the thing that is actually, you know, in some way overlapping between customer value and business value? And being that kind of person that is customer obsessed, that understands the customer in a really deep way, is very different than project managers, because project managers want they want to reduce the risk around requests that are coming in. So I don't know. I think there are lots of times where we will probably consider these types of roles inside of very technologically oriented groups. And I don't mean like tech, like Silicon Valley tech, where they kind of understand for the most part what product managers are supposed to do. But I mean like where there's like, it's very engineering driven. Usually the EMs or the engineering managers or the GMs end up playing that role in some way, not always as good as they could, right? Because there's power structure issues that end up coming in with that. And so anyways, my argument would be that I've seen a lot of times where people will join as a product manager and they end up doing things in a way that is not very expansive. And our job as product managers is to constantly reframe and reassess what we're trying to consider. And that could be a lot of different roles. It's just that, you know, I don't think there's a standard. I would actually disagree with there being like a standards body. Christopher Alexander, who was like a really amazing architect and wrote a book like The Pattern Library, Synthesis on the Notes on the Synthesis of Form, would talk an awful lot about what he called the Gilded Cage, which was this fact that like architecture was something that was very kind of open-ended for a long time, but then once it started to become established that you had to have certifications for architecture, it kind of sucked all of the life out of the fact that architecture is about creating something, a place to live, a place to work, a place to be, that really addresses those needs of that person. And those things change all the time. And so I would just argue against that idea of certification in some way. I get why, and I almost went down the PMI, PMP route when I was like early on in my career at Microsoft, because I thought I wanted to do that, but I realized I didn't want to build bridges or, you know, like be part of the space shuttle. And so I don't need those types of things. So anyways, I would just say like, I think there is a really important place for project management as a skill set, but it is different than this idea of opening up possibility. And I think that tension is really powerful. So you can't do that. You can't do that as the same person, because you collapse to one or the other based on who you are. That's what I would finish it with.
Okay, sorry. I agree with you, and I'm not saying that we should excuse me, that we should have standards like very rigid, walls around it. I appreciate innovation, so don't get me wrong. That's core to product management, right?
Hey, we're all product managers here. I get it. Okay.
Exactly. I agree. By heart, we're all product managers. I agree. What I'm trying to say is like when something like that happens, we feel like I need to go remind them of what a product manager does. So those type of simple definitions.
Who are you reminding?
The ones who don't agree with what product managers do.
Who are they?
The ones
who are they? And I guess what are those core competencies that they like? What should product managers be doing?
They should. What are you trying to say? Do you want me to tell you what product manager?
Yeah.
Product manager is supposed to, like Chris just mentioned, find that sweet path between that overlapping between what customer needs are and what organizational goals are, right? Making sure that vision is ahead of us. We're taking one step closer to that vision. Again, not saying that the vision should be 10-year long vision. It should not be something set in stone. We should be able to, at one point, if we have to, pivot or even take a U-turn, and make those changes that's needed. So a product manager is the glue that keeps your stakeholders, your delivery teams together, making sure that they are actually working on those goals that are going to make that vision possible. And that one person is so important for all of this. We cannot, it's okay to ask them to wear another hat, but at some point we should be, as a community, holding that trip together, because they have a lot more responsibility, as a product manager than, product manager who also does project management.
So continuing on that, Lorenzo, because otherwise I'm gonna poke at this other thing forever. But let me build on what Smita just said. So Lorenzo, what are some of those core skill sets? Are some of those other core skills that you think product managers should have?
Yeah, so for me, the first one is curiosity. I think a PM needs to be curious, because they need to dig into understanding what are the pain points, what the customer needs, why, and why. So really dig deeper on the why of everything. And if you're not a curious person, you can just ask one question, think that's enough, and okay, I'm happy with it, and you go build something. Whatever is going to build is not going to stick, because there's something laying way much deeper. So yeah, curiosity for me is one that's very important. And one that's really important, maybe because of the way we see, but because of the way PMs work, is stakeholder management. And it doesn't matter the size of the company. It can be a startup, it can be a large corporation. You need to be able to manage people expectations, timings, what and when. So having a stakeholder management skill is really important. It's something every PM needs to develop. And something that for me, and that may not be agreed by everyone, I do think that PMs need to have at least some skills on metrics and data analysis. I'm not saying the PM needs to be a data analyst and be able to run multiple very complex queries, anything like that. But I think a PM needs to be able to understand the metrics, set metrics, and do basic analysis to understand how the product is behaving. So these are like basic skills that I think everyone needs to have, no matter the corporation and the size. And everything else, I think, is more you can develop, you can learn, but they wouldn't be a deal break between you need or not.
Chris, what other skills?
I mean, like when we worked together, I put together a really crazy Miro board that was like all the different skills, and we would start to like create this difference between kind of the hard and the soft skills. And I thought what was really interesting about a lot of these things was that it actually wasn't so much about like there's a hard skill around, say, like road mapping, right? But it was more about the fact that like over time you gain experience in how to understand how people interpret roadmaps, how to get approval and kind of buy-in from stakeholders on the roadmaps, how to write things so that other people can understand what you're working on from a transparency standpoint. And so I think more than anything, it's kind of this set of tacit knowledge or expertise that really gets into the fact that there are many techniques and artifacts that product managers are supposed to own within an organization, but it's all of the surrounding skills that have to do with the way other people interpret those artifacts that is really very important. So maybe I'm thinking more about team dynamics. I mean, that's why I got into product operations. I still think of myself as like a PM, but I'm, PMing the PM experience, I guess is what I always say about that. I've been wrong. I think I'm wrong actually for the future of product ops, if you want to hear about my kind of future vision for that. But I think fortunately, product operations will really become more about just like product team operations, because it's really about the way that all those groups work together, Whereas I've always been very concerned about the, like, how do we make PMs as effective as possible? And so that's what I'd say is, like, I think, like, questioning your assumptions, being very focused on user research and data, like being able to pull insight from not only the idea of like the behavioral data and things like customer feedback and just seeing what people talk about, but then also like going in and diving really deep. I think for me, like research itself is such a core part of the job for product managers, that you should be like best friends with your user researchers, and you should learn how to actually do user research in a way that is really powerful. So that's like really
clearly spoken from a large company. User researchers.
No, come on. I mean, I mean, yes, that's true. We don't always have user researchers, but I mean, I do have a talk where, you know, it's like, you know, you can do research that is bad. And so that's why, like, I think product managers should be doing research. Like, they should be involved in research. And if they're at a smaller company, they are going to be doing the research. So they should do it in a way that actually doesn't cause them to create more biases than are worth, like negative biases, right? And so that's one thing I think is really, really powerful. I think also this idea of, I think I'm going to like commingle these two ideas, which is kind of the idea of like facilitation and decision making, and the sense that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to create containers by which people will make decisions. And that includes asynchronous types of things like documents and the collaboration on those, and then synchronous ones, which is like, how do we facilitate a meeting between a cross-functional group to be able to get like more understanding of something. And so I kind of see those two things as very commingled in some way. And so to me, I think like the idea of being a good facilitator, I think a lot of the time for more junior PMs, it ends up looking like you're just a hyper confident PM, that trope of the PM that is just so confident that they can just push anything through, even though they have no idea what they're doing. I think that's like the very surface level view of it. But the reality is like PMs are there to help facilitate those decisions, not to actually make the decision a lot of the time, because it's not in our domain most of the time. Right? When we talk about maintainability of code, tech debt, we talk about like what are the key problems to solve, what are the like how usable is this? Those are all like different functions that we should be working with in some way. So there are other expertise that we end up working with and making sure that they're represented in the right way in not only meetings but also in our decision making process. And then finally, like I think that we should be wrangling the uncertainty means that we do crazier things to be able to understand that. And so I mean I believe a lot in like randomness and things like that, but that's like another kind of weird vein of decision making is how do you use things like randomness or nowadays tools like ChatGPT to question your thinking, right? Gemini, Copilot, all those things can be set up in a way to actually give you critique in a very low risk way. And so from those standpoints, I use those tools a lot to also critique my thinking, because I guess my motto is that I am wrong today, I just don't know how yet. And so I'd say that's like every product manager's motto.
Yeah, I'm always arguing with ChatGPT.
Good.
Probably unhealthily, but yeah, Isaac in the chat room also mentioned things like market research, analysis, product strategy, a long list here. Time management, project management. Anyway, but to what some of what you were just saying there, Chris, in the you kind of were talking a little bit about just different levels of experience there. What, Smita, what is a good way to kind of differentiate? What's a good, I mean, like in a meaningful way, how should we differentiate between junior, mid-level, senior product managers?
I would say at a junior level, you know, you're someone who has not had has zero experience or very little experience, then you're willing to learn, you know, work maybe 6 months or so in the industry, any industry, doesn't matter, as a product manager. Or just even has a business degree and is wanting to be a product manager. I would say that would be, you know, the junior level role. Mid-level will be somewhere maybe up to maybe 2 to 5 years of experience doing product management in different industries would be great, not just, you know, one place. Kind of exposes you to a lot of other, you know, industries, the way things are done. Small and big companies give you way more exposure than just working in, you know, in the same company. And then, you know, someone who has worked for, you know, 5 or more would be someone senior. I would say when you're at a junior to mid-level or maybe mid-level, you're actually helping the teams, releasing software, doing your releases, and you're able to handle it independently. That would be kind of like the mid-level role. And at the senior level, you're actually working on strategy, working more with leadership and stakeholders, and really, helping them make those higher level decisions. I would say that would be a senior level role in product. And feel free to add, guys. I mean, that's just the way I have seen, going through the industry.
So Lorenzo, some teams use rubrics or ladders to help kind of guide growth from one level to the next. They don't always work in practice. Have you used or created kind of any competency models or rubrics in your org? What worked? What didn't work?
Yeah, definitely there were situations where that worked and where that didn't work. So most of the times when you see these rubrics, especially I think when you come to senior level, you start to see how people are getting there, like what is the expectation on the different categories. So how the person should be behaving, what should be the knowledge on product sense, product execution, research. And when you look at senior level, it's kind of expected that a PM is amazing at every single thing. Like, the senior PM should be a superhero. And that's not fair for anyone. Like, it's impossible to be extremely, extremely good in every single lenses of a PM work. And then if that's true, the person shouldn't be a senior PM. The person should be a CPO, a VP of product, because there's nothing else to develop. They are at the top level of everything on product. So I see a lot of the times the things goes in this way. So that's when for me it didn't work. When it worked, it was really good that you had, it was a while ago, but I think we had 3 different pillars. So it was one for product sense, and product sense was broken into 4 different abilities that is expected within product sense. Again, the same for product execution and leadership.
Can you go into some of those details? I think there'd be a lot of people very interested to hear.
Yeah, so for product sense, I think was customer. I will check later. I can send you, but it's been a while, this one. But I think was being able to identify customer pain points and translate that into requirements. So can you actually understand what the customer is saying, not just think of solution, but being able to go deeper on the problems and opportunities. There was a second one on product sense that was, can you actually segment your customers in a meaningful way that will lead to meaningful products? So it's your segment. Are you able to create MECE segmentations that will have different pain points for different customer segments and stuff like that? So there were different skills as part of these pillars. And there was the third one for leadership. It's like, you shouldn't expect every PM to be a leader because, the PM is a leader. But if you're not in a real leadership position, it's unfair to ask that person to be a leader of the company. So I think it was fair to have this third pillar when the role was expected to be a leader. So maybe principal PMs and group product managers. And everything, all these pillars, they were weighted by ambiguity and complexity of the problem that the person was playing. Because sometimes you can be really good at it, but the problem or the space you are playing is very limited and straightforward. So it's not fair to compare the same person when, let's say the person is leading the front end of AI that no one knows where it's going right now, or the person is doing exactly the same thing for a very set onboarding journey. So having this complexity and ambiguity to level all the other pillars worked really well. So it was really easy to say, the person is really good at this, but it's really good at this, a very simple problem and very straight, a very clear place to play against someone that's doing really well on a space that no one has no idea what's happening, and it's very ambiguous, very open, and there's so many different ways it can go for. And that was actually really good to have.
Chris, Same.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest concern that I have with any of this is that we're starting to, I guess, the mechanization of a role that is meant to be very open-ended. And I think that's the part that I keep on getting caught on, is that there's a person, Von Tan, who's a friend of mine, and he wrote The Uncertainty Mindset. And The Uncertainty Mindset is this book that's kind of about the idea of how innovation teams actually work, and the way that they end up doing their work and forming teams, and actually even doing things like job roles, how they set the process by which they do things. And my biggest concern is that we end up trying to box people in rather than allowing them to discover the right way to work with their bigger teams. And so he calls this negotiated joining. But I think I'm very worried about us being overly restrictive or specific about some of these roles, when the reality is it's more like a mindset, or maybe we're not talking about, there are outcome goals, right, for us to do things within these product teams, but maybe there's more like process goals for us to work on, right? So the process goals are that we're always considering the newer things that we need to. We're always doing user research. We're always like continuing to push forward with the way we do these things. So yeah, that's, I guess, my main concern.
Have you come across any companies that you think do that well, where they have good, well-defined rubrics or ladders? Like, I know you've had a good pedigree.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked a lot of different places, and I guess I've seen that usually it's because of the manager that you end up actually developing things better, rather than the rubrics. If anything, the rubrics actually are used in a weaponized way to keep people from getting promoted, especially when they become like checkboxes. And so what I would just say is I think there's like a real value to having someone that cares about your career, that actually wants to make you better, and they're the ones that are helping you do that in some guide. So to me, I guess, I think it really depends a lot on the team and the manager rather than the rubric, because I mean, one of the main things I've seen in almost every rubric is as you get higher in level, the idea of like breadth or complexity in that role becomes bigger and bigger. And that makes a lot of sense. Like, you want a senior person to be able to handle very broad and complex things, but the way to go about it is, it's like going from the idea of figuring out the intricacies of the solution as a very junior person, up to figuring out which solution is right, to what problem to solve, to what customer to have. And so I think that type of like elevation ends up being really powerful too. So yeah, I would just say, like, I've seen good like spots within these organizations that do a great job around that, but I don't think it's the rubric itself that actually causes people to develop and be better at this type of skill set. Gotcha.
So kind of progressing here, and a career ladder should do more than just outline promotions. It should give people clarity, motivation, growth. What does, and this is to you, Smita, what does a healthy product career ladder look like in practice?
I'm not a big fan of the annual reviews. I hate them.
Well, forget the review. I care about the ladder itself.
Oh, you mean how would they progress? Okay, sorry, my bad. It is freezing for me on my side. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but when you guys were talking, or even when it was just coming and going. So forgive me. So career ladder, I would say something on the lines of a junior PM. Then again, I don't think I should be defining this. Every organization has its own way of defining product roles. Some of them will call the a product senior product person as a product lead instead of product manager or senior product manager.
So beyond the titles, like the titles are different everywhere. Some have even called them program managers. So like beyond the title, like what are those expectations, or how do you think about what should kind of go into each of the rungs of that ladder?
Well, I'm thinking more of a product manager level person would work with teams, one or more teams or one or more products that they will be working on. And then senior product managers would have the responsibility of, one or more product, depending on the organization. And then, it would go all the way, depending on if you're a group product manager, you would be handling the whole org for that, for those type of products or a certain line of business in an organization, and so on and so forth. And directors and pillar leads are mostly the ones, who are working with the organizational objectives, really, close to the higher leadership. And so those decisions would definitely trickle down to the group product managers, the directors, and others. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think we're getting in the right direction there. Chris, what would you like to add to that for what you kind of like, what you don't like in a good, healthy career ladder?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the hard part about career ladders is that they end up being, very much like focused either on the artifacts that are owned, or it ends up being that there's like material outcomes for the business. And for both of those, they're fine, but they're not actually talking about like what does the team feel is actually going on. Like I would say the best way for me to judge a product manager is to understand whether their team understands like where they're going, like what is the impact they're going to have potentially if they build the right thing. What is it that they should be working on now and next? Like those end up being feelings that are more about comfort of the team. And that to me is actually much more important, because I would argue that like, yes, we want to have great business outcomes, but the likelihood of that happening 100% of the time is, or it's not possible to do 100% of the time. Like if we're doing new things, if we're actually building out things that are truly innovative and experimental, we have to fail. Like we actually have to fail. Otherwise we are not doing things that are innovative enough.
Sure.
And so
help me understand what, so, yeah. And I love this topic. So when I'm looking at a career ladder, just we forget the titles, level 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
When you're talking about comfort of the team, what do you mean? Like what's, I guess, maybe I'm even saying it correctly, but what is level 1 comfort, level 2 comfort, level 3?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like a very junior PM is one that is kind of being asked for things. Things have to be pulled from them rather than pushed to the team, right? I would say a more senior PM is one that is doing the work to not only make the team feel comfortable with the uncertainty that team has to deal with, but they're actually pushing and communicating and aligning in a way that is much more valuable than a more junior PM. And again, it's not that like junior's bad and senior's good. It's just people learn about how to make a team feel like excited and confident and in the flow of what they need to actually do. And so that to me is actually what the product managers really are doing.
All right, so I'm gonna get crude in this definition. So are you saying that should I be thinking about someone's level as a team NPS score?
I'm going to be. I'm not going to respond with an answer about NPS scores because we all know that they're bad. In some way, it's a question afterwards that really matters, right? Like, why did you say this? And the thing is like for PMs that are really good, right? They, it's not that the person would say that they love them. It's that they like this person is driving us to make the best decisions. That we are more often right than wrong, that our process is actually helping us make better decisions, that the things that we're considering when we talk about the vision and the future of this, people know what that is and it's well communicated, right? And so it's I guess like NPS, like I get what you're saying in a way that it's like, am I satisfied with what this PM should be doing? But I think there's like a weird personality thing sometimes, right? Like I've worked in teams.
And by the way, I hate NPS too. So
I know.
Just for the record, for anyone who doesn't know that.
But like the idea of like an engineering manager not liking the way a PM is working because they're constantly challenging them, like that's okay. Like I'm fine with that, right? Like the PM should figure out a way to make their personalities work together, and that's sometimes hard. But the EM, it's okay if the EM is like, I disagree with this person, but they're right, right? Or they help us do the right thing. Like, I think there's like a certain amount of, again, I think I call it tension between team roles, but I think there's like a real value that people don't always agree, because all the different roles that make up a team actually end up helping us make all better decisions in the end.
So
And
this is
so,
interesting to me. Like, so there's something very appealing, and I think it's very well aligned with, I think, the times right now, and in part of that in some way that career ladder being driven by the peers perspective of the individual. But I guess you have to communicate to someone at some level, like, what the expectations of that person are. So I can understand maybe like the peers might be grading the person at some level, or giving that kind of feedback on the individual. But on that career ladder, aren't there still bullets or expectations, like they're able to do X, like as the EM, oh, I'm grumpy about it, but man, they can do X, or I can
That's right.
Is it like, are you saying the peers verify it? Is it like,
I mean, there's like
I
a
guess,
bunch of we've
like,
had this
how do
discussion
I
before,
like,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Well, this is a new
outline
version of it, and I like this one.
Well, so like the first version, at least in the consultancy world, was that, did your account manager like you or not, and that was a reason to be promoted, right? Like, and that's not a good way to promote people. That was a bad way.
No.
Like, that was like a wild west of, if
Or
someone likes
have you been here
get
for
promoted.
5 years?
Yeah, and that's another one. Yeah, absolutely.
Ugh.
Like seniority, right? The next one after that ends up being kind of outcome based, which again is like hyper focused on business outcomes. Usually it's tagged to metrics that are either really hard for a PM to actually show a direct impact on, or they're things that, like, you're going to be wrong, and so you will have up and down.
So let's just find one thing, right? So okay, so we don't do it based on outcome. Fine.
Yeah. So next is competencies,
what-
and after that is team cohesion, right? Those would be the latter. The
But
different
if
things
I'm
we're talking about.
communicating to someone who's level 2,
Yeah.
here's what you want to be level 5. Here's all the different things that you have to be able to do to get to level 5, right? What's one just one of those characteristics?
Again, I think it's that you're going to be dealing with very broad contexts and a high amount of uncertainty. And again, Von Tan is writing a lot of really interesting posts about this idea of not knowing things. And there's lots of different ways to not know. But like, if you can actually define that this is our overall business mission, the moment you're able to get to the point that you say, I'm identifying this customer base, and these are the problems that they have, and here's the problems we should solve within our business, that is a very high level PM to me. The very low level PM and how they have to grow there is that they have to go beyond this idea of, I know exactly who the customer is, I know exactly what the problems are.
Okay.
I'm working with a solution.
All right. So I've said, hey, they can define this high level understanding of the business. Cool.
Yeah.
How do I know how do I know it's correct? How am I validating that to say, oh yeah, you are now a level 5?
Yeah, but
because I could create a strategy and then define something, and it could just be completely bonkers.
Yeah, I think that's where, the work that goes into it, right? What are the processes? Like, and process is a bad word here, but what I mean by process goals is, like, did they actually learn an awful lot about this? Did they go and do research? Did they experiment? Like, did they work with the team to figure out what was feasible?
Sure,
right?
but they drew all the wrong conclusions.
Well, but that's,
and I guess that to me, like,
all the time.
you're hearing my pushback of, there's got to be some measure of outcome. There's got to be some positive that came out of it, other than feels.
Yeah, ideally, yes. But I would just say that also CEOs deal with this, right? Like, there are plenty of times that CEOs make decisions that were well formed, they were well researched, but they were the wrong decision for the marketplace. And so I don't see why product managers should be held to any different standard. That's what I would argue.
Well, the CEO, they can blame someone else about that, right?
Well, they still get fired. And yes, like, if you make enough bad decisions, you're unlucky. I get it. Like, I don't know what to do about that.
I hear what you're saying. No, it's some. No, it's interesting. Food for thought there. I like that. Man, I don't know where I want to go now. All right, so what I guess from what can we do as a community from I got to help better support career growth for product managers, Lorenzo? Um, from a community perspective, I guess beyond just that company, that just from inside the company there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it's hard to say how the community can like elevate the profession and solve for the problems we've been discussing. But again, I think having an active community that's open where multiple people can share is a first step. So having things like this chat here is something that can really help us, but anyone that's watching, and it can help growth. So
Great,
I think,
we solved it. Awesome.
yeah, I don't think we did, but I think it's one
Oh.
step there. And having actually more of this, because something that I feel being in Brazil then coming to Australia is that it feels that like all the communities, they are very regional so far. So in Brazil, you had the Brazilian product community that was most from each of the cities. Here in Australia, you have the Australian one. Then you don't actually see, at least I haven't seen that many global ones. Maybe in US, you have the biggest one. But it feels a bit disconnected with every region having their own standards, and it may reflect the moment of the region, but I think having a more global community would be something beneficial.
Yeah, I
And
think through
a second
things
thing,
like the, I just want to, through like the product group, through the product way, like all the different chapters we have around the world and our presence. I've really just seen, and that's why I asked a lot of these questions today, in that I've seen a real convergence in definitions and understanding of the role of product management from where I sit. I don't see the variability I used to tell. I used to say every company is a unique little snowflake or butterfly, or I don't know what's unique. But I've seen that kind of convergence. That's where a lot of these questions came from. But sorry, Lorenzo, continue, please.
Yeah, and there's a second one that I think it may be harder is that even on events like this, I'm not saying that's the case, but on meetups or when the community is coming together, I think we need to start being more candid and honest, because every time you go into these places, you only hear about how amazing everyone is and how everything that they did were always amazing and brought these massive outcomes and they saved the world. It's very rare when you go into conversations and people talk about the real day-to-day, all the failures and how they learn from it.
Oh, I've tried.
And I think that's
that. So let me tell you, for anyone who's listening right now, I want to do a talk about failures, just failures, spectacular failures. I'd love to do that. I'd love to feature you. Whether it's you want the whole show to yourself, I'll do that. You want to do a roundtable, I'll do that. But I think to that, you're right. Getting people to talk about failures in any kind of public setting, especially online, is near impossible. But if anyone hears me right now, I want to do that. So it's a topic I always have in my backlog that I'd love to get to and explore further, because I think to that you're right. Everyone wants to hear what went wrong, how it was handled. Like that's where the learning is. Like that's where like the real learning is there. So no, I think you make a really good point. But yeah, if anyone out there, contact me. LinkedIn, I'm the product guy. Jay Horn at the product guy. You can get in touch with me really easily. Sorry, go ahead. Let's go ahead again, Lorenzo. You really, I'm getting triggered.
No, but I think that's mostly like we trying to be more honest and having proper learnings than self-promoting. That sometimes it feels like a lot of self-promoting. I think that would be helpful. But that were the things that came to my mind.
Yeah, I think that's wow. You really hit a lot of buttons there. Smita, you want to add?
No, I agree, and I think community support, supporting the community, growing the community awareness would be one thing that I do a lot, and I am thankful that you mentioned it, Lorenzo. That's something that's core to what we do too. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Chris, anything you want to add on this question? I think I'm gonna wrap it on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that like learning and development for product managers is not as easy as just kind of like learning the terminology, figuring out how to write the artifacts, things like that. I mean, I believe
most people don't learn the terminology correctly.
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean,
so what's the point?
I mean, and you can only learn so many like templates and frameworks and processes before they're just kind of trying to get at the same thing. It's really like, and this is something that John Cutler and I have talked about, but like frameworks are really just like this point in time for that person that created the framework that was contextual for them, and it may not work in your case, right? Like that's what expertise is, and that's why every product manager at some point in their tenure has to create a canvas, is because they're trying to encode what they learned in that exact moment, but it doesn't work everywhere. And so I think like what we need to do more when it comes to learning and development is actually focus on hands-on experiences. Like I've been a big believer in something called decision forcing cases. And so I wrote a couple of them, one publicly, one within Google. But this idea of like, how do we actually use kind of role play and rehearsal to help us gain more experience without having to go through the experience. And decision forcing cases are something that the US Marines use an awful lot in the way that they end up training kind of decision making, tactical guidance, strategic guidance, things like that. And so it's really valuable and important not only to go through that experience, but to also then have other people that are peers that are both junior and senior to you, that then you can learn how they think about it. And that starts to then build that expertise without you having to go through the actual situation. So that's an example of where I don't think we really invest into learning and development the way we should for product management development.
Great. No, that's great. That's really good. We got two other comments from the audience I saved for the end since they were a little bit out of sequence. Hold on one second. Lost it. Where'd they go? All right, there they are. So Emily was asking, how does, and I'll do this as a toss up. Who wants to grab it? Emily was asking, how does your actual product strategy, or how does product strategy, how does approach to prioritization change from startup versus enterprise? So a little bit of a callback to the first topic. Who wants to tackle that one?
I can tackle. I think just being just joining the startup. I think on the product strategy itself, when you are on the startup, the product strategy, like the definition of what is a product strategy, sometimes it's way lighter because the startup is constantly changing. So you can't have a 5-year product strategy because in 3 months, the company may be doing another thing. So I think the process is much smaller, quicker, and very lighter iterations, and just keep improving on that instead of having a very strong, defined vision and 3 years of product strategy. And at the same time, to approach prioritization, I think on enterprise level, the prioritization sometimes needs to go through a lot of different levels, understand the different priorities of different pieces of the business, how that affects your product and your prioritization. So it's a much longer process, thoughtful process. At the same time, on the startup, you have one thing to solve for now. Like there's that big problem that you need to solve in the 3 months. So it's way easier to say, okay, have everyone that needs to give the input and what will solve and what is the priority right now. The priorities may change a lot in 3 weeks, 3 months, but it's easier to come to a decision and then later can review. I think in big enterprises, it's harder to come up to the prioritization, but once it's done, it usually sticks for longer and you don't have to keep doing that often. So that's how I usually see it.
Outstanding. Next question is from Jaya Lakshmi. She's asking, I built 3 novel tech products as part of my PhD. Will that count as experience when I apply to product management jobs? Tossed up into the air. Who wants to catch it?
I'll take it. Sure, why not? If you put in your efforts and you understand what what product is, and a tech product is. I'm hoping it's a digital product is what you're referring to. And you have
Works with non-digital or has product managers as well.
Yeah. And very important that, if you can speak to it in an interview, you can write the details of, from a product perspective in your resume, please do that. It will help you, definitely. Yes.
And I would add, though, that like what is the follow-up on those products is really important here, because like, I've definitely seen projects that come out of PhD programs and they tend to be something that is built once and then thrown away afterwards as a proof of concept. And so I think there's like value in that, right? Like you're discovering new things ideally. But to me, product managers are a lot about like the ongoing long slog of like refining, and maybe that is where I agree with like Steve Jobs about his idea of like the people that are actually part of a company. They have to deal with the constant change and adoption and maintenance of things in a way that really shows the value, I think, of product management, rather than, if you just build a bunch of stuff and it all gets thrown away, like I don't know if that's as valuable. So that's what I'd say is like, I think it would be important for you to show that you've actually done work that has maintained things over time as well, and learned and updated the way that you think about stuff over time.
Yeah, you gotta tap on not just say, oh look, I built something.
Yeah.
You gotta demonstrate the skills, or
That's right.
Or hey, I was working on this and everyone thought this was a bad idea, and here's how I convinced them. That's like one of the skills. Like, and then there's a lot of other layers and skills to it as well. But that's what's going to come up in an interview for a product management job, especially if you're holding up these things. Like, what was your contribution to these products that what wouldn't have happened unless you were there? Like, what is that added value you brought to it? What are those skills, like the iterations that you went through, as Chris was just saying? So awesome. I think we hit all the roundtable questions. We've gone through all of that. So you know what that means? Oh, no one said. All right. Well, what that means is it's time for the final part of trivia.
Which company is famously associated with coining the term dogfooding for using your own product before lunch? Once again, which company is famously associated with coining the term dogfooding for using your own product before lunch?
All right. Let's go around the room. Oh, no, I can't see everyone. All right, I won't leave this up too long. Let's go around the room. I'm going with Chris last because he spoke too much on this. Smita, anything? Any guess for a company? Or answer? I don't mean guess. You know the answer. Anything?
No, I do not.
Oh.
I do not.
Lorenzo.
Missed it.
Can we say the answer now, or
Yes.
just
Anyone. Whether you're in the chat, whether you're on air, you can say the answer.
is it Microsoft?
Yeah. And you see Chris is already nodding. Anyone who said, let's call it champagne, I'm not going to first. So, yeah, the answer is Microsoft. And so just a little bit of background, because I did do my homework. So the idea of dog fooding a product, using your own product internally to test and validate it, for those who don't know, originates from the phrase of eating your own dog food. And the phrase became popular in the tech industry, I think as far back as the 1980s, particularly at Microsoft. It was widely believed to have been popularized by Paul Maritz, a Microsoft executive who sent an email in 1988 encouraging his team to start using their own products by saying, "We should eat our own dog food." But where does that come from? The phrase... In dog food commercials in the 70s, a TV ad supposedly featured a dog food spokesperson who proudly claimed he also ate the dog food he advertised, suggesting authenticity and trust. Yum. And dog fooding, and just some background, dog fooding, it matters. It helps uncover flaws, usability issues. It helps build credibility by showcasing confidence in your own product, tightening feedback loops between product development and real-world use. And as Chris already mentioned, My interesting fact was some companies have opted to evolve the terminology to drinking our own champagne to make it sound a little bit more palatable and high class, I suppose. So there you have it. That's our trivia there, and yeah, the champagne. Actually, I haven't. No one's used that in front of me. So cool. So anyway, so that kind of wraps our show for today. I really want to thank the roundtable. I want to thank everyone tuning in off camera. The engagement's been great questions, great comments, and it's what makes our podcast special. It's your participation is a huge part of what makes TPG Live unique. So any final comments? Let me just kind of go around the room, see anyone's got something to say, and I'll just go in the order that you're in my screen. So I'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to keep telling people that, like, your career is something that, especially if you're early on, is really more about discovery. And kind of like a early startup, you should be trying to learn as much as possible. And so to me, I think that's the most important thing that I've done in my career, is not necessarily following a plan, but looking for novelty, trying to understand the values that I actually hold, and how does that help me make those types of decisions in my career. So that's what I would just say.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, so I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn, and would just love to hear how anything that I said either works or doesn't work for you, so that I can learn from you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Lorenzo.
Yeah, for me, just thanking you for the opportunity of being here. I think it was a great chat. I really learned a lot from Chris and Smita and you. So thank you for that. And thank you from everyone who joined. If there's anyone in Australia who wants to have a coffee, just send me a message on LinkedIn. But anyone around the globe, just find me on LinkedIn and can chat. And yeah, again, if you'll find that anything that was said was interesting for you or you learned something, just let me know.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people over there, so you might have a few good takers. Smita.
I want to thank you, the product guy, right? That's what I would call you again if I said
trademarked too. Wow.
You do have a trademark. I agree. Thank you, Jeremy, for putting us all together, and this was entertaining, I would say, for me, as well as educating. I got to meet three wonderful leaders in products. So I appreciate that, all the efforts that you put in. I also own a product group here in Birmingham, so I know how much effort goes into this, so I really appreciate it. Thank you for educating me today. Learned from a lot, including the audience here that's attending. I love coaching. We do have at Product Forge, we do have the option to, just coach you, if not train you. Feel free to drop a line on LinkedIn, connect with me, just send a message. I would love to connect with you and see if we can help you in any way possible. Again.
Awesome. And how do they get in touch with you on LinkedIn? Anywhere else?
Or you can send us a message from my website, productforge.org, and you should be able to send us a query from there.
Excellent. Excellent. And we'll get all those links in the description at some point soon. So everyone, and by the way, this was great. I love the back and forth, the debate. As you can tell, these are topics that are definitely part of my passion here. So I had a lot of fun with a lot of the back and forth we had here today, and I hope everyone who joined us did as well. And so, if anyone is interested in being on a future roundtable, we'd love to have you join us on screen. Every person, every background, every experience is welcome. You just got to have a point of view and want to express it. You can contact me at jhorn@theproductguy.com. And also, if you have other topics you'd like to see us cover, such as failure, which again, I'd love to get that one to come together at some point. If you have other topics you'd like us to cover, just let me know in the comments below what you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. And then also, if you're listening, I have a favor to ask. Click like, subscribe, enable notifications, and tell 5 of your friends, 5 product people or people that want to know more about product management, about the TPG Live podcast and the Product Way YouTube channel. It would just really help out. It helps feed the algorithm, helps us get out there and really help a lot more people. And again, I just want to thank again both our on-camera, our off-camera roundtables for your wisdom, your conversation, and I'll see you all next time on TPG Live. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Just one more time, I want to share how you can support this show and gain access to exclusive career-changing resources. For less than the cost of your daily coffee, you'll unlock actionable product management strategies and case studies, proven solutions to real-world challenges, all delivered ad-free. Want to take it up a notch? At $15 a month, you'll get a personal shout-out in an episode and your name in the credits, a great way to showcase your support for our global product management community. For $25 a month, you'll gain priority access to exclusive events, detailed case studies, one-on-one resume feedback, and toolkits tailored to enhance your product management expertise. If you're ready to go all in, subscribe as a product leader and enjoy personalized mentorship sessions and exclusive insights to elevate your career to the next level. Your support makes it possible for us to keep delivering insightful content and building this amazing community of product professionals. So please, head to patreon.com/theproductway and choose the level that's right for you. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Thank you so very much for your support.